I'm getting married, he said, grinning like a boy in love. But it wasn't to my mom. It was to his college girlfriend. The same one who sent him drunk messages at 2 a.m. when I was in high school. The same one Mom used to cry about behind the laundry room door. Now she wore my mother's ring. My name is Samantha. And from wherever you're watching this, stay with me. Have you ever watched your family collapse like a slow-motion car crash, and no one even tried to grab the wheel? I was 22. Fresh out of college. Dad invited us all to dinner. We thought it was to celebrate my new job. Instead, he raised his glass and announced he was leaving Mom. Said he was finally choosing happiness. Said it like we'd been his burden. Mom looked down at her salad. My little brother whispered, "Is this a joke?" It wasn't. 2 weeks later he moved out. 3 months later he married her. Her name was Jillian. She wore white. My mom wore black. After the wedding, Dad tried to call me. "Let's be adults about this," he said. Like I was a tantrum waiting to happen. Like he hadn't detonated our lives and handed us the debris. I didn't yell. Didn't curse. Didn't scream. I just disappeared. Changed my number. Deleted him from my life like a corrupted file. No drama. Just silence. Because silence is louder when they expect you to beg. Over the next 5 years I built quietly. Got promoted twice. Launched my own firm by 30. Worked until my bones ached. But I didn't tell a soul. Mom never asked for updates. She'd grown quiet too. But sometimes I caught her scrolling old pictures of Dad, then wiping them away like dust on glass. Then one Thursday morning, I walked into the office early, coffee in hand. My receptionist looked pale. "There's someone waiting outside," she said. Turned and saw him. My father. Older now. Gray. Kneeling. In front of my door. With tears streaming down his cheeks. Whispering my name like a prayer. He had no idea who I'd become. But I knew exactly who he still was. The man who broke us. And I had waited years for this silence to be broken on my terms. Some things heal. Others just wait for a stage and spotlight. He looked smaller than I remembered. Time had rounded his shoulders. The once proud man who stood 6 feet tall at my graduation now crouched in shame. In front of the very company he'd told me not to start. Said it was too risky for a girl who cried during math homework. He didn't recognize my logo. Didn't know the firm bearing my initials had just landed a $12 million contract. Didn't know the woman in heels walking toward him was the daughter he'd abandoned. Until I stopped in front of him. "Hi, Dad." The word tasted like vinegar. He looked up broken. "Samantha," he whispered. I didn't know where else to go. My assistant hovered awkwardly. I turned to her, voice steady. "Cancel my meetings." Then I opened the door to my office, stepped inside and left it ajar. He followed like a ghost trailing after a life it lost. He sat. Tried to compose himself. But his hands trembled. "I lost everything," he said. I said nothing. "She left me," he continued. "Jillian. She took the house. Cleaned me out." So I said nothing. I thought, maybe, you'd want to know. I nodded slowly. "I already do." He blinked. "What do you mean?" I leaned forward. Controlled. "I know because she emailed me." That caught him. He sat up, confused. I explained. 3 months ago she sent me a message through LinkedIn. Said she'd always been jealous of your love for us. Said you still had pictures of Mom in your wallet. She found them after your business trips. Said you still talked about the life you gave up. I paused. She said she hoped I was nothing like you. His mouth opened, then closed. The silence in the room was heavy. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked. I laughed, sharp as glass. "Tell you? You don't get updates on a daughter you erased. You don't get access to the woman I became just because you're falling apart." He reached for his coat. I just needed help. That's when I stood. Walked to the window. Looked out over the skyline I built. And dropped the final blow. Help. Like when Mom begged you not to sell her piano. Like when I asked you to come to my art show and you chose Jillian's yoga retreat instead. His voice cracked. I was wrong. I turned. Face unreadable. "No, Dad. You were selfish. And now you're just alone." He didn't cry again. Didn't beg. Just walked out slowly, the same way he left years ago. But this time I had the last word. Some men don't break when they leave. They shatter only when they're no longer needed. After he left my office I didn't cry. Didn't shake. Didn't feel much of anything. But that night, I drove to my mother's house. The one-bedroom condo she bought after the divorce. The one where the wallpaper peeled in the hallway and the heat never quite worked in winter. She opened the door in her old robe holding a cup of peppermint tea. Her eyes scanned my face. "You saw him, didn't you?" I nodded. She didn't ask how. Didn't ask what he wanted. She just stepped aside and let me in like it was the most natural thing in the world. "I always thought he'd come back," she said softly, sitting beside me on the couch. "But not like that." I looked around at the faded furniture. The same throw pillows she'd had since I was 12. The one chipped lamp she never replaced. And I remembered something. Something I had buried under ambition and silence. The night he left, Mom locked herself in the bathroom. I heard her sobbing behind the door. But she never let us see her break. The next morning she made pancakes, smiled, and told us, "We rise or we rust." She'd been rising every day since. Quietly. Without applause. "Mom," I said, "do you want to move?" She blinked. "I mean it. Somewhere with sunlight. A garden. No creaky radiators." She smiled like I was asking if she wanted a puppy. "Samantha, that's sweet but I already bought it." Her mouth dropped open. "I put it in your name. It's by the lake. 2 bedrooms. I thought you might want a studio for painting again." She covered her mouth, eyes flooding. "You did this." "I've been doing it. Quietly. I paid off the last of the mortgage 2 years ago. I've been saving for this. For you." Her hands trembled. "But why?" "Because you never asked for anything," I whispered. "And he took everything." We cried. Together this time. The next day I sent movers to pack her things. She stood in the new kitchen with lemon light pouring through the windows and whispered, "He'll never know peace again." But peace wasn't what I wanted. I wanted him to see what it looked like when the daughter he tossed aside became the storm he couldn't weather. And the universe, funny as it is, gave me that chance sooner than expected. 3 weeks later, I received a call from an unknown number. I answered and heard a voice I didn't recognize. "Miss Taylor? My name is Mark. I work at the state hospital. Your father listed you as his emergency contact." I froze. Why would he? He collapsed outside a shelter. Malnourished. Dehydrated. Said he had no one. For a second, I almost laughed. The man who once said I was too soft had nowhere left to go but the daughter he called weak. "Should I come?" I asked. There was a pause. "He kept asking for you," Mark said. "Crying. We thought you'd want to know." I looked out the window at the lake. At my mother painting lilacs in the sun. And I knew. I'd go. Not to comfort him. But to watch him sit in the wreckage of what he built. Some daughters carry pain. Others become its author. I didn't dress for pity. I wore black heels, a dark green coat, and the same silver watch my father once said looked too serious for a girl like you. The nurses looked surprised when I walked in. Apparently he'd been describing me like I was a child. A sweet little girl who just needed time to forgive. I stepped into the room. He sat propped up in the hospital bed. His face was gaunt. Beard patchy. 4 taped to the back of his hand. But when he saw me he smiled. "Sem," he breathed. Like we were in some movie reunion. I didn't smile back. "You shouldn't have listed me," I said. He tried to sit up straighter. "You're all I have left." "Whose fault is that?" He flinched. "I didn't think things would turn out this way," he muttered. "She said we'd travel. Start over. She promised." I cut him off. "You left a family. For a fantasy. And now the fantasy dumped you at the curb." His eyes shone. "I know. I know I failed you." Failed? He had destroyed us. He drained the joint savings account. Left Mom with unpaid bills and me with college fees I had to cover in night shifts and tears. And now he wanted redemption because he couldn't handle rock bottom. "I just wanted to be happy," he whispered. "And you thought we were the problem," I replied. "Not your selfishness. Not your cowardice." He looked down. Then he tried a new card. "You're successful. You've done so well. That has to count for something, right?" I leaned against the wall. "You want credit now? For being a bad memory that motivated me." Silence. "I built that business while eating cereal for dinner. I built it while you were sipping mojitos with your soulmate." I built it with a mother who clipped coupons so I could print marketing flyers. Tears slid down his face. I'm sorry, he choked. I don't know how to fix this. And that's when I told him. You don't. But I'll help you understand something. I pulled out a folder. Slid it across his lap. Inside was a bill. For $28,400. The amount he stole from the joint account before he left. Plus 8% interest. His hands trembled. What is this? Closure, I said. You owe it. And I want it repaid not in cash, but in acknowledgement. Every day you wake up I want you to know, I didn't need your love to survive. I needed your absence to grow. You look like he might collapse again. You said I'd never be more than a dreamer with paint on her hands, I continued. Well, Dad. I turned the paint into gold. He whispered something. I didn't care enough to listen. I left the room without looking back. The nurses told me later he didn't speak for hours. Just stared at the folder like it was his gravestone. Some wounds don't heal. They transform the ones who were bleeding into warriors with swords made of memory. 3 weeks after the hospital visit, I got a voicemail from a number I didn't recognize. Hi Samantha, it's Carol. I was your father's friend. Could we speak? I didn't return the call. But a few days later I got another. This time she sounded like she was holding back tears. He's not doing well. He talks about you every day. Says you're the only one who ever told him the truth. I think he's finally seeing it. Funny. It took decay and regret for him to finally open his eyes. But I wasn't done. Not yet. Because while he'd spent years pretending I was the bitter daughter who didn't understand grown-up decisions, I'd been building something far bigger than a business. I was rebuilding our legacy. My mother had passed the year after I opened my first studio. A soft exit, the kind that feels like a whisper disappearing in wind. She never saw my second gallery. Never got to walk through those glass doors lined with my paintings, her recipes framed in the lounge, her signature stitched into the couch pillows. But every inch of it was her. She used to call me her masterpiece. So I made sure the world saw her in mine. Then one morning I got a letter. Handwritten. In his old blocky print. Dear Samantha. I have nothing left but words. I gave up everything and got exactly what I asked for. A second chance at youth with a woman who didn't want the years that came with it. I was cruel. I told myself you were cold, ungrateful, distant. But I see now you were surviving. You didn't disappear from me. I disappeared from myself. You are the best parts of your mother. And the strongest parts of yourself. If you never speak to me again, I understand. But thank you. You made sure the last truth I ever heard came from the daughter I didn't deserve. Dad. I read it 3 times. Then I folded it, placed it in a frame and hung it in the employee break room of my newest gallery. Not as a symbol of reconciliation, but as a warning. The caption beneath it read, Absence makes the truth louder. 2 months passed. Then 3. The calls stopped. The letters stopped. Until one day I came into the gallery and saw a man in the foyer. He was kneeling right in front of my mother's portrait. I didn't recognize him immediately. His frame was thinner. Hair grayer. But the second he turned, my breath caught. He stood slowly and said softly, I didn't come to ask for anything. And I believed him. He wasn't holding flowers. He was holding one of my brochures. The one that told my story, the one that mentioned my mother. I just wanted to see what you became. I stepped past him. I became what you left behind. And with that I opened the main doors and let the sunlight flood in. He didn't follow. He stood there, a man frozen in a memory, watching the light spill across walls that never needed his shadow to shine. Sometimes revenge isn't loud. Sometimes it's the sound of your silence standing taller than their apologies ever could. A week later I got a call from the hospital. Not about him. About Carol. She'd overdosed. Prescription meds and wine. They said it was likely accidental, but I knew the tone of that kind of escape. I didn't go. But I sent flowers with a note. May she find in silence what she never found in love. After that, it was like a domino fell somewhere behind the curtain of his world. His house was repossessed. His car, auctioned. Retirement accounts, drained. Turns out Carol hadn't just left emotionally, she'd emptied their finances on the way out. He'd been sleeping in a friend's garage. And one afternoon he walked into my gallery again, this time carrying a suitcase. The staff stared. Some whispered. But I didn't flinch. I met him at the front like he was any other walk-in. He looked at the floor. I don't want money, he said. I need to say something. And I won't ask again. I nodded but didn't speak. I used to think love was about having someone next to you. Then I realized, it's about showing up for someone even when they don't have space for you. I didn't show up for you. I showed out. I performed. I ran. And then I blamed you for standing still. His eyes were red. He looked old. But I didn't feel sorry. Not anymore. I'm not here to rebuild, he said. I'm just here to say that what you've built is breathtaking. I let silence bloom between us. Then I said, do you know what this place used to be? He shook his head. A bookstore. One mom and I used to walk past every Saturday. She'd point at it and say, someday you'll have your name on a place like that. So when it closed I bought it. I didn't do it to honor you. I did it to honor the girl you left. The one who waited on the porch every Sunday and asked Mom why Daddy missed dinner again. He swallowed hard. But he nodded. And for the first time he didn't beg for closeness. He accepted distance. Before he left he said something I never expected. You don't owe me anything, Samantha. But if you ever write about this, don't lie to protect me. I watched him walk down the steps, suitcase dragging behind him like a long, tired apology. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just turned, walked back inside and opened the next exhibit. It was called Ghosts Who Built Me. And his picture? It was buried in the shadows of a hallway labeled mistakes I refused to repeat. Because healing isn't always reunion. Sometimes it's just making sure they can't hurt you again, and still giving them one last graceful exit. Even if they never deserved the door. The exhibit became a sensation. People didn't just walk through it, they felt it. They left notes. Some cried. A woman once whispered, I wish I had your courage, before rushing out with mascara running down her cheeks. But the most surprising reaction? My former art professor came to see it. The same man who once told me I lacked emotional maturity for large-scale work. He stood in front of the final piece, a triptych titled Before, During, After, and didn't say a word for almost 10 minutes. Then just as he turned to leave he said, this is the kind of art that gets remembered. That night I got an email from a major publishing house. They wanted to commission a visual memoir, something raw, poetic, visual, tied to the story of my mother, my father, the fracture, and the silence that came after. I almost said no. But then I thought of the little girl I used to be, tracing the shape of my mom's face in old photos, wondering why love looked like leaving when it came from men. So I said yes. And I called it, The Man Who Broke Us. It wasn't about revenge. It was about truth. And in telling it, I discovered the real victory wasn't that my father finally saw me. It was that I no longer needed him to. When the book launched I got a package. No name, no return address. Just a single note inside. You turned our pain into purpose. That's real art. D. I knew the handwriting. He was still watching. Still hoping. But I never reached back. Instead, I donated the proceeds from the first edition to an art therapy program for daughters of broken homes. Girls who'd been told they were too emotional. Too dramatic. Too much. They were exactly enough. Just like I'd always been. I was invited to speak at a university. The same one my dad had once walked across, young and full of charm, holding Carol's hand instead of my mother's. I stood in front of a packed auditorium, looked out at a sea of faces and said, my name is Samantha. My father left because he thought starting over meant erasing the past. But starting over isn't running. It's choosing not to carry what broke you. The applause was deafening. But the real sound that stayed with me? The silence afterward. Peaceful. Whole. Like coming home to yourself. Because sometimes the loudest revenge is becoming someone they can't define anymore. Someone they can't even reach. And realizing, you no longer care if they try. I never saw him again. But I did hear about him, through whispers, online articles, the occasional distant cousin's accidental update. He tried rebuilding. Taught a few night classes. Volunteered somewhere in a church basement. But he never got back the shine he once carried like armor. Some people said that was sad. I didn't. Because the truth is, some men aren't meant to be restored. Some are just meant to be remembered, as warnings. Years later, I stood backstage at a national conference for women in business and the arts. I was the keynote speaker. A woman in her 60s grabbed my hand and said, I heard you once slept in your car to pay for art school. Is that true? I smiled. Not because of the memory, but because of what it taught me. Yes, I said. And I'd do it again. Because starving for my dream taught me how to feed my own soul. That night I walked back to my home, my own home, a townhouse wrapped in jasmine vines filled with light, silence and pieces of my journey hanging proudly on the walls. By the door I kept one old photo. It was Mom and me seated on a park bench years before the fracture. Before we lost her. Before he left. I never framed any picture of him. Not even as a child. But I kept a single slip of paper. The one he gave me the last time we ever spoke. You don't owe me anything, Samantha. That sentence was freedom. So I burned it. Let it curl and blacken in the kitchen sink. Watched the ash rise light and ghost-like and whispered, I never did. The gallery expanded the following year. We opened a second space, dedicated solely to women artists who'd survived abandonment, betrayal, and silence. The grand opening night, a young girl came up to me, barely 19, and said, My dad left too. He told me I was just like my mom, too broken to keep. But your story made me think maybe he was wrong. I hugged her, tightly, and said, he was. Because that's what revenge really is. Not screaming. Not confrontation. Not even justice. It's rising so high above what they did that they become background noise, muffled beneath the roar of your becoming. It's building a world they don't get to enter. And standing in it barefoot, wild and whole, whispering thank you to the pain that pushed you here. I don't think my father will ever find peace. I have. Because I no longer live in the ruins he left. I built something greater. And I named it, me.